Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Inna Segal for the first time. And we'll welcome her to the podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well, Phantom. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're an intuitive healer and a best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body. And we're going to talk to you about your story, about your book, and like anything that we want to discuss today. But before we get to the heart of your story, we always ask a couple of questions of any guest on the show. One of the questions we ask is, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
What really motivates me is seeing people change their life from feeling like they're a victim, or they're feeling sick, they're feeling like there's no hope in their lives and they're stuck, or they just don't know what to do next and don't know how to move forward in a way that is inspiring and positive. And so what I love seeing more than anything is how, when I teach them, when I guide them, and they start to use the healing processes, their life absolutely changes and transforms in every way, from their health to their relationships to their careers, often to how they feel about themselves and how they experience life on a daily basis.
So your journey into this space of being an intuitive healer, could you maybe start at the beginning? How did that start for you?
Absolutely. So I think for me, it's like many other people. It started from this place of, I'm sick, and I had a lot of health issues from when I was pretty young. So when I was still a child, I would end up in the hospital with digestive issues, and nobody knew what to do with me. Then when I was in my early teens, I started getting psoriasis all over my skin, which was something that my family had. My dad had it, his twin sister had it, my grandfather. So it was considered as a, I guess, hereditary illness that
Straight to your
that I
family?
was going
Yeah.
to, yeah, that I wasn't going to be able to get rid of. And then when I was about 15, I started getting back pain, and my mom took me to all the doctors, all the physios, chiropractors, and so on, and nothing was really helping. And by the time I was about 19, 20, I was in agony, and I was really having major issues walking at different times, where I could be crossing the road and I just can't walk in the middle of the road. And someone would have to drag me there, or across the road, and it was pretty painful, it was pretty difficult. And then I had this amazing moment of epiphany, I think, where I was seeing chiropractor for about a year, and I wake up, my back was twisted, it was inflamed. I called the chiropractor and told him how bad it was. On the way there, I literally was in such agony that I felt like I was so numb. I couldn't even feel my body anymore, because I was literally out of my body. It was so painful. And I was quite depressed, to be honest, because I was like, how can I be this young and have this issue, or these many issues, I should say? And so when I got into his office, he actually came out and he was very calm. And he said to me, your body's stuck. And I said to him, oh, yeah, I know that part. What are you going to do to help me now? And he was quiet for a minute, and he said, nothing. There's nothing I can do to help you. Your body wants to be stuck. And
Mm.
I was so angry when he said this. And he said, go home. And so on the way home, I was enraged. How could he say this? How could he do this? And something happened there for me, where I just felt like my thinking, my feeling, and my will, kind of all of me went, I'm going to heal myself. I just cannot keep doing this. By that stage, there were times where I was going to see some kind of practitioner, could have been 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought to myself, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going home and I'm going to do it. I'm going to heal myself. And so I had done quite a lot of acting training because that's what I thought I wanted to do. And we did a lot of meditation. We did a lot of connection to the body, breathing. And so I literally placed my hands on my back at the time, and I was breathing into the pain, which I'd never done. I'd always been trying to get away from it. I would tense up so that I wouldn't feel it. But this time I was breathing with the pain. And as I was breathing, I was also counting backwards from 30 because my mind was going crazy and thinking, I'm not going to do this. Who do you think you are? And then it occurred to me that I had been to everyone and nothing has worked so far. But even though I was quite skeptical if there's anything spiritual that really existed, because I grew up quite mainstream in that way, I just said, if there is something there, I need help and I need it now. And as I had my eyes closed, I just felt this warmth and like a golden light coming through my body. And then I have no idea where this came from, but I just said, I want to see my back. And I felt like this light switch went on and I could literally see my spine and where it was inflamed and twisted and what was going on. I had a shock at the time, but it also occurred to me that not from a victim place, but from a really curious place. I mean, why do I have this? Why do I have this issue? And I didn't know that at the time, but I'm quite a visual person. And so I had this memory as a visual image that came up. And it was about me moving to Australia, which is where I've lived for quite a few years, and not knowing how to speak English, not knowing how to speak the language, and being bullied and feeling really uncomfortable in my body and unsafe. And then the image changed to a lot of conflict with my family, with my parents, because again, they moved into a new country, to a new place, and they also didn't know how to settle in. And so it felt very uncomfortable for quite a few years when I was young, living with them, and stressful. And so I felt unsafe there as well. And then I realized that my family, my grandparents had gone through massive, massive trauma. My grandmother's mother literally saved her life by standing in front of her and telling her to run during the war and being shot at. And my grandmother lost all her brothers and sisters and never really processed that pain. And I felt like I was carrying it in a way for her.
You're carrying it like a from your family pain carried to you.
Yeah, yeah. And then I just really felt like I was one of those people who absorbed other people's energy and pain because I wanted to help unconsciously. And so in all of these insights, and I cried at different moments, I got exhausted. I fell asleep. The next day when I woke up, about 70% of the pain was gone. My back wasn't twisting anymore. It didn't feel inflamed like it had for years. And I thought to myself, something is happening. And then for the next 2 to 3 weeks, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I just literally kept connecting to my body and asking questions and understanding and moving through emotions and letting go of things. And by the end of this 2 or 3 weeks, I had no pain. My skin was clear and never came back. I've never had really any back pain since then either. And my digestive system improved where I could eat more food and not feel like I'm really unwell afterwards. And my anxiety just went down. And then I discovered that I had this capacity to see and sense things with other people the similar way that I did with myself. And then I just started learning and studying for the last 25 years.
So you learned about your interconnection between your body, your emotions, and your physical self and your kind of a spiritual self in the universe. And I think you started to realize, science only has limitations. So every time you went to the doctors, they were looking for something very clinical, very specific. They because they weren't looking into like what your mind can do in terms of your stress levels and the hormone levels, the cortisol levels. There's all kinds of things. If you can get yourself less stressed or learn how maybe you were pulling in too many people's, you're carrying all that weight. Like you were carrying the weight of your parents and your grandparents. So maybe you're kind of empathetic, but you need to be able to kind of shake it off, right? You have to learn how to kind of shake it off or be able to, you know, regulate that. And it looks like you found a way to regulate.
Well, absolutely. I feel like so many of us have traumas in our lives or really painful situations that we just push away and suppress because we don't know how to deal with it. And the best way to deal with it is ignore it for most people. And what I found was that my body's too sensitive. I can't ignore these types of things. So, through my own experience, I started learning how everything is a perspective, Phantom. So it's like we have these perspectives that we take on, and they're often painful or negative or victim like. And these perspectives grow and actually create illness and create pain inside the body. And so when we start to understand, where does this come from? Where did this come from? And how is this still affecting me right now? So often when people fight with each other or have conflict, it's not present conflict, it's triggers from the past. And so what I've done is I've learned how to turn this around from hurting you and, from pain, from people leaking their energy and becoming chronically fatigued and exhausted, because that's what it leads to as well. To how do we harness that energy by understanding two things: ourselves, um, where this comes from, and obviously there's more than two things, but those are the
Yeah.
main ones. And how do we then start to turn things around so that we can experience aliveness, healing, um, passion in our lives, intuition, rather than blocking all this and pushing it away and experiencing anxiety and depression, which is what so many people are going through at the moment in their lives.
That's interesting because, like, I've had, on the podcast, I've interviewed about 1,200 people, primarily creative people, and also people who are like authors and healers, and what I've seen like a common thread is like, creative people tend to be able to channel the inner and the outer. They have empathy. They can, writers kind of pick up what's around them and what's inside them. So they pull up subconscious cues, muse cues from the universe, and in that cathartic process of creating the art, they kind of shake it off. But if people haven't been kind of trained or have a skill to do that, sometimes they would do what you said is they suppress. They try to say, "Well, I don't want to feel that." It's kind of like the Victorian poets had this idea of the looking glass self. So you go look in the mirror, and anybody who's a creative that starts to really get into the depths, like writers, artists, painters, that we try to go into that looking glass self and pull out the vulnerabilities. And then in actually taking those vulnerabilities dead on, you don't hide it, you embrace it, and then you can move from it. But if you haven't been taught or shown a way to process, then you could build up all these resentments, you could build up all these bad loops, all this bad energy. And so it seems like you found a way through your secret language of your body that it's like it's not just your body, it's your mindset, it's what's going on in your soul, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I discovered that was incredibly fascinating was the way that we're all connected. And one of the ways is that within our soul, we can say within our body, within our inner being, in ourself, there's so much wisdom. And every part of a body is actually holding this incredible information if we talk about healing. And when we access it, and like you said, the creative people are often processing their stuff when they're writing, and writing is one of the ways to do it, or they're singing, or they're doing, they're acting, and they have to self-reflect. They have to kind of understand their character, and so they have to understand themselves in a deeper way and access all of this internal richness. But what I found, and the deeper I go, the more I find, actually, it's kind of never ending in this wisdom and this discovery, that every part of us is constantly giving us messages from the outside and from the inside. So it's kind of like, whatever I'm feeling inside, I'm going to do in the outside world. I'm going to
Hmm.
act it out. And whatever I'm acting out in the outside world is going to affect me internally. And so we create this loop, like you were saying.
Yeah, it's a two-way street or multiple
Absolutely.
directional. It's multi-directional. It's not even two ways. It's like infinite ways.
Well, exactly. And so when we look at something like, let's take our eyes, because a lot of people have vision issues as they get older. Um, what causes somebody to have vision issues? Well, we start asking questions like, what do the eyes do? What are they for? Well, they're for seeing, essentially. So the question then becomes, what am I seeing in my life, or what have I been seeing that, maybe is uncomfortable, maybe is painful, maybe I don't want to see? And for a lot of people, if it's just a general condition with their eyes as they get older, it's because, one, on the physical level, they're too tense, they're straining their eyes too much, they're in front of their computers and all of this. We know that. There's a part of it. But they also have parents and potentially grandparents who are getting older, and people that they love are getting older, they're getting sicker, they're dying. And most people don't want to see that. They don't want to handle that. They don't know how to handle it. So they actually subconsciously start to go, life is difficult. It's painful. I don't want to see all this. It's hazy, so the vision becomes hazy. And then we could go even deeper with that, and we can look at the left and the right eye. And we can start to go, well, the left eye is all about how my internal vision of myself, how I experience myself. And what do I see? Do I see myself getting better, healthier, stronger, more inspired, more empowered? Or do I see myself getting frailer, feeling like I don't have the support that I need? I don't have the love of my life. I don't have the people, and so on. And so, again, I'm going to create an issue with my eyes, depending, and there's a variety of issues that can be created based on how I'm experiencing life. And then with the right eye, it's more of a masculine, so it could connect to what's going on with my relationship with masculine people, for instance, or it can, or has gone on for years. What is happening around my vision of my world, of the world that I live in, and of myself participating and doing things in the world and living a potential legacy? And how am I creating, and what am I, how am I making a difference and an impact? So all these things can actually, when we start to delve deeper, we can look at the wisdom of each part of the body and the soul and what it's saying and how we're living that experience.
Some of these like your concepts, like what I've been, like in Japan, I've been in the East, and there's some kind of chakras, and there's all kinds of like older, more ancient or indigenous concepts of the body where like they're kind of in line with your thinking. What I've heard, it seems familiar. So I'm wondering, like, is this something that you have, when you were talking about studying, did you start to look at what the ancients had done, what had been done in the past, and some of this is like an amalgamation of that, of this original kind of concepts that you've come up with, Awaken the Healer within modality?
Look, I don't know if anything is fully original in the world. I think we're always building and refining. So for me, absolutely, I spent almost, every waking hour that I'm not teaching or writing or doing podcasts, studying. I'm always studying. I feel like I have this huge desire for deepest knowledge. And so I've absolutely looked at the chakra system. I've looked at the subtle bodies and understanding them from a more, I guess, scientific perspective, not necessarily the mainstream science, but from actually understanding how are we made up? What are we made up of? And so for me, we have different energy bodies that impact us. And because I've also seen people cross over and die, um, I've actually observed exactly how these, let's call them subtle bodies, work with us. And the chakra system is absolutely connected to the astral body in one way, which is an aspect of our soul and all our emotions and desires and needs and wants. And why am I so different to you, Phantom? Why do I have different unique desires, but I'm also very different to potentially my brother or sister or cousin or even a twin? Why am I so different? What is unique about me, which is part of the soul and part of this astral body? And that has a particular chakra system that is connected to it, that is all about a feeling self and how do we feel about ourselves and what do we know about ourselves. And each chakra is kind of, the 7 are the most known chakras, and each one's connected to a particular part of your body, a particular, which is a center essentially. And each center has organs, obviously in parts of the body that tell us a story as well. So when we combine that ancient wisdom with a more of an understanding of also how the body works with, in a way, subtle bodies, like we have this etheric body, which is all to do with our hereditary. Why do I look the way that I look? Like, why do I look like my mom? Why does my daughter look like
Your
me?
genealogy, yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so but the etheric has different kind of sets of chakras, which is, I think you mentioned before, which is more about a spiritual development and how we live our lives and our biggest patterns that hold us back, and how do we go into that, all the deeper part of us, and refine that. So yeah, these are the things I'm studying all the time and learning about.
So your Awaken the Healer Within modality, we've been talking about it, but like when you came up with the concept of Awaken the Healer Within, I think we've been in the space, we've already been speaking to it, but maybe was it part of that aha moment, or did that come later? That the idea of the modality.
It's actually really funny. In some ways, I had and I recently was speaking to one of my students that has been doing the work with me for a while and is actually a practitioner now of this modality. And she was saying to me, Inna, when I first connected with you, I thought it was a gimmick. I literally thought that when you said awaken the healer within, it was just some funny gimmick. And she goes, and then I did your masterclass, which like a free masterclass. And then I started doing your work and I realized, oh my God, this is real. All of us have this healer within that we can awaken, and it's all about self-empowerment. And so for me, Phantom, the idea came from what I was seeing for years and years. Originally, I started doing healing work on other people when I was 21. And as I was starting with my family and friends and just friends of friends, and then what I was seeing is that people thought that I was special because they would come to me with that with that feeling of like, you know me and you can tune into me, and you can tell me stuff about myself that I don't know. And I was like, well, actually, I get to see you for maybe an hour, here and there, and maybe even if it was once a week, but you live with yourself 24/7.
Yeah.
And so wouldn't it be much more empowering and inspiring if you were the healer? I can help you a little bit, by tuning in and guiding you somewhere. But what if you knew how to use the processes that I've come up with? What if you, which is a combination of many, many people that have come before me and have inspired me, and modalities that have come before me, where I've kind of gone, wow, Chinese medicine works like this. And I love pressure points, and I love, connecting and breathing. And, we need to use our visualization, or we need to work with our feelings, or we need to move our body. So it's all, it's like, because this is the only job I've really had in my life besides when I was younger, at like teenager. Um, so to me, it's like something that I've looked at from every
You're
angle
very
of,
expansive. It's like you've got to seem
yeah,
like a very expansive, and you've looked at multiple like paths. And some people today, they tend to be very narrow. They want to say, well, it's this lane, it's these 10 steps, it's this, and it's one size fits all. And it's always been, in my perspective, that you have people are individuals, like you said. People are uniquely twins could be uniquely different. They have these that you might look outwardly the same, but you're not. So the one size fits all doesn't work. And so when you start to really understand, there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of gray areas, and so you have to have more individualistic or a wider viewpoint. I think that it allows you to, like, explore. You're never done until you're not here anymore. And even then, if you're a Buddhist, you're just continuing on another path. But you know,
absolutely.
so I think, like, some people want to know when they're done. Like, but you're never really done.
Constantly.
You're never really done.
Constantly. I actually remember, this reminds me so well of, I remember talking to one of my students once, and I was saying to him, this is many years ago, who had done quite a few workshops with me at that point, but was still, he was a CEO of a big company. And so he was still very kind of seeing things as, when do things begin and end, which is also a very masculine way to look at certain things. And I was speaking to him, and I was saying to him, look, I was connecting to my hip area, which is all to do with family. And I believe, as you were saying, when we're working on ourselves, we work with themes because there's constant issues and challenges and themes showing up in our lives. So, and whatever is going on is the thing to work on, right? And so I was working to do with family, and because I know the hip area is all about that, um, I was connecting to it and discovering things, and with kind of ancestry. And I remember saying to him, oh my God, at one point, I just felt this incredible shift. I didn't even know I was carrying stress there, because I didn't have pain. It wasn't from pain. It was just, oh, I know where I'm working on my family, and I know that it connects to this part of my body. And I felt afterwards like the flexibility and the movement that I could have in my hip area was just completely different. And he did say, he's like, when does it end, Inna? I don't get it. And I said to him, but why would you want it to? That's my
Yeah.
question, is like,
Yeah, he said, like, it
if
it is
you
a
were,
male kind of tendency that we want it to, end. And it's like what I've grown to understand, as a creator, you start to call your feminine side, because that's kind of like the creative
yeah,
side of your is like the divine feminine. Though
yeah,
some men might not believe that, but like a lot of creatives, if you're a male, you do realize you have this feminine side that you can pull, and a lot of the creativity comes from that. Not that you don't have your male side too. And you have to have a more open mindset, because you start to see things like yin and yang, the blood, you start to have a wider frame. Like you were saying before, like you're with your eyes, we all filter. And,
yeah.
sometimes the male filter can be very limiting.
Well, it can be both. I think this is an actually really interesting topic that I've been discussing a lot lately. And what it is that we don't realize that we do have these feminine, masculine aspects within us. And it's almost like we have left side of the body and we have the right side of the body. So, and they're different. So when we start to open our mind, how can we not? How could we not? The heart is so obviously more emotional, more about relationships and intimacy and connection. And so, and self-care and self-understanding. Whereas when we look at the right side and we look at the liver within us and how the liver works and how it, processes and detoxes, our drink and food and whatever we're taking in and holds it, we kind of go, well, this it is a more masculine way. Like one receives and impacts us that, and gives, and the other one's kind of processing stuff and trying to work and cleanse whatever we're putting in. And when we start to understand how we can embrace and work with both, because what I see, Phantom, is that so many people actually don't understand it, and so they deny both. They push away both, and then they feel depressed, they feel anxious, they go, I don't know how to be creative, I don't know how to live my life in a way
Mhm.
that is passionate and inspiring and following my I guess both my heart purpose and my soul purpose. And the two, they're very different things,
Yeah.
because in following your kind of your soul's purpose, this is what you really believe and feel you need to do in the world. But your heart is about the people you connect with and how you connect with them and who you allow in your life, and also how you feel about yourself and how you grow and treat yourself. And we need to be conscious and working with both sides to, one, be amazing in relationships and to have extraordinary relationships, and two, to achieve what we really want to achieve. Because if we only work with the feminine, we'll never achieve things in our lives, because it's
Yeah.
it's like the feminine is the, I want to create, but I don't want to finish things, I just want the fun part.
But
And
yeah,
the
you need kind
masculine,
of yin and well, you need to have that balance. And something it's not a perfect balance because sometimes one is going to be a little bit more than the other. But to understand they're both there, like you said, that
yeah,
I think a lot of people are stuck in a paradigm that they don't feel safe embracing something that maybe they've been taught to like shun or they've been
yeah,
taught to have shame about it. So if you grow up in a household that has a lot of shame or they shun it and it's like that's a bad thing, that's not the way that you should frame your world. Then it makes it very hard for you if you've been given this kind of programming. It's not impossible to
absolutely.
reprogram, but a lot of people get stuck in the programming and they get stuck in the bad loop.
Absolutely, they do. And they misunderstand things. Like, just because somebody wears pretty dresses doesn't make them feminine. The feminine comes from within. And just because somebody, shouts really loudly doesn't make them masculine. It's like, it's that understanding of the different qualities. And I find it really funny because my partner, he has really long hair, and which I love. I was like, I find it so attractive and stuff. And I've had different people who've said to me, "Oh, my partner is like yours, very quite feminine." I was like, "There's
You didn't
not
see it
much
coming.
besides the hair." Um, he is he does own some of his feminine for sure, but I'm like, he's much more masculine person, and there's a balance of,
Yeah,
and
what
he says,
what we see though, that's the thing. It's like we have these filters, we have these frames.
"Mm,
So somebody's been taught that long hair makes you more
yeah,
feminine. They
yeah,
don't realize there's other aspects of masculinity. That's a surface item, right? That's what you just see. the deeper level is like, what do you actually do? What do you think? What do you
Yeah.
believe? And so there's that person. If you just frame it in the visual, we know what happens with what we see. Like if a witness to a crime, you ask them, you know, in law class, I had law class, and we had a big thing where they brought in a situation, they made a crime happen in front of us, and they taped it, and they asked people what did they see. Everybody saw something different than what actually really happened on the tape. So it shows you the filters that people have are kind of already built in. You know, there were people that they said, well, the guy was, you know, was like Latino. They were said he was a African American, and like there was no black person or Latino in the room at all. So so people had these frames that they immediately put on things, and it wasn't even what happened. And so like that tells you like they really have to kind of open and ask the question, like why do you feel that way? What is making that happen? And kind of challenge yourself and challenge your preconceived notions.
Absolutely. Exactly. And like you said, asking. I said to my partner one day, why do you what does long hair mean to you? And he said intuition. And he told me actually this story about American Indians and how they had, they did this experiment when they had long hair. It's like they could feel the wind, they could feel all this intuitive awareness. And then the white people came and had their shaved their heads, like the American Indians, and they lost their capacity for this
Yeah, well, there's
intuitive.
the culture like didn't shame that. Like if somebody has a frame and they're thinking it's
Mm,
sexuality, they're thinking it's feminine, and they don't like it, and they think it's like, oh, these indigenous people are not civilized. Right, and they thought they were too wild for them in terms of and so they had to frame it in what they knew because they had their own frame,
yeah,
and that's the problem is like people have to be aware of how they're framing things, and some people
absolutely.
just think the frame is the canon, right?
Yeah,
And then you can't challenge the canon because that's what it is, and then we get stuck because if you've got a lot of canons in the world that frame people's perspectives, and it's very limiting. Because like if you believe in just exploration as an artist, like if I'm a musician and say, well, no, I'm not just going to stay in classical. I might go into jazz. I might go into punk. I might go into hip hop. I might go into multiple genres because I want to explore and what this song actually needs this. But there's some
yeah,
people in certain schools is like, I'm only going to do blues. I'm only gonna
yeah,
do classical. And then it seems very limiting because they don't have a wider perspective and they're not willing to even look at the other perspective.
yeah. So true.
So that's just a musical comparison that I
Mhm.
think is similar to other ideas.
Mhm, very true.
But in terms of like the secret language of the body, like can you define like what is the secret? Like how are you framing secret?
I think I'm framing secret from the perspective of we are, it's there, but unless we look, unless we want to find the secret of who we are, we can live a whole life without having one thought about who am I and what is it that I want and why does my body work in this way, and is there a spiritual nature to me, is there like what really happens within us. And so it stays in that secret kind of experience, as opposed to when we go, what, I'm a person that it's like I'm born and I'm here to discover myself. I'm here to understand who I am. And I really feel like healing and knowing who you are is needs to connect together, because unless you know who you are, what do you believe and think and feel, and it seems like a very simple thing to say, well, of course I know, but you don't unless you really sit with it and look at things, you don't know what you really deeply feel and believe. You just see what's happening and you think it's real. Like, this is it. This is
Mhm.
what's happening in my life. So that's the reality, like you were saying, in terms of perception. And so to me, the secret is there's a sacredness there as well of, me discovering myself, and then through that discovery gaining wisdom. And it's my favorite word, is wisdom,
Wisdom.
actually having wisdom.
It's kind of like this constantly evolving self that I always like.
Yeah.
The great artists that I've always admired, they were constantly evolving even to the end of their life. That
Yeah.
they never felt like they were done, and that's
Exactly.
always been my kind of roadmap. Is like, a lot of times if you're a musician, it's like a young person's game in the popular world of musicians. But in the long term of like you're a musician, if you're a musician because you love playing piano, you don't do it just because you're not, just because you never have a top 10 hit doesn't mean you don't love the piano. So you
Yeah.
continue to progress on piano as long as you love it. And you find there's always somebody that could play better than you. There's always somebody that has a different point of view approach. And so if you're a student of the piano, you're constantly learning like, oh, there's new techniques, there's new thing. There's always something to learn. So you're never really done until you can't play it anymore.
Absolutely. Exactly. And knowing yourself is just such a huge part of that discovery. And I think even with music, the deeper you know you, the better music you can play, the more touching, the more moving, the more kind of feelings you have, and the more experiences you have, the better you become in every kind of artistic pursuit.
Yeah, I think it's that vulnerability of being able to break through the wall. That everybody has a wall to keep themselves safe. Everybody has like a mask that they put on. And the great people, the artists who really connect, that people think are authentic, are able to break through that wall within themselves. And then they becomes like this universal key, whatever key it is. They have all these universal keys or feelings or frequencies that people pick up on. So when you throw it out, that universal frequency into the world, like people radiate with it, and there's like a law of attraction. People get drawn to it, and then they put their own feeling. Like when I put a song out to the world, I don't own it anymore. The listener owns it, and they have their own feeling, and they radiate on a frequency that made them pay attention. But how they experience it is not how I experience it. It's not how you experience it. Not how anybody else
Yeah.
experiences it. It's like their own unique experience.
Absolutely. I also see it as the law of resonance. It's kind of like what's resonating with you. What's the pathway that you create? And it's very interesting, all this, because in terms of, even if we come back to the chakras for a minute, it's like I explain to people how we can actually learn to co-create from our chakras and manifest into our reality by aligning and by understanding. So, if we connect to the crown chakra, for instance, this is us opening up to the new ideas, to inspiration, to spirituality, to higher kind of self, and going, I don't know where this comes from. Maybe, like you were saying, to having this muse come in and inspire us. And how good are we at that? How good are we at opening up to that possibility? And then it comes back into the third eye chakra, which is all about, can I envisage this? Can I think about this? Can I put it out into the world? Can I see myself doing this? And then it comes into the throat, and we communicate about it. We maybe sing about it. We express,
Mhm.
you know, we say, this is what I want to create. This is, who can I connect with that can support this vision of myself? And then it goes into the heart. And the heart is where we go, what's my why? Am I really, really into this? Is my heart fully invested in this? Will I keep going even when the excitement and the momentum is not there? And then it goes into that digestive area, into the solar plexus. And it's like, all right, am I willing to back myself? Am I willing to put time, money, whatever it takes, hours and hours of time to um, to make this happen, even when I'm not seeing the result instantaneously? And then it kind of goes into the sacral area, and this is where we start to really see things moving and shifting, and it's like the energy builds, and we know it's not there yet, but it's like it's building the momentum, and something's about to happen. And this is where I say to people, it's very dangerous to actually stop it, because this is how you get cysts, and this is how you get all sorts of reproductive issues when you stop this creative process at that sacral chakra area, which is also where different archetypes live, like the inner child, which is our most creative self. And then we have the root chakra, and even with the color, it's red, it's passionate, and it's got this vitality, and it pulls people in through the law of attraction, through the law of resonance. And once it's in the root chakra, it's like it's out in the world, and people are coming and connecting, and things are happening.
Well, it's like you got to have that permission structure so you don't bottle it up. And then you're also, I've always loved, the idea of the muse is like, you can channel in this like flow state, and artists are kind of in tune with the inner and the outer. So the inner and the outer are kind of get the synthesized subconscious with what's going on from the muse bringing things in. So you're able to kind of pick up on things. Like writers are famous for picking up on all these things around them and then be able to document it through that art of writing. So they hear people when they turn a phrase, or they use then they reprocess it and they frame it in a different context, and they kind of make it their own because they're out there. They got their antenna out and they're picking up on stuff, and they pick up on it and they document it. And that's the way their art style works. But it's the ability to kind of process that, and they're very in tune with their subconscious, and a lot of that stuff is in their subconscious, and they just are able to call it. And it seems like it's coming from the outside, but a lot of it's like inner.
Well, absolutely. I feel like that's what I would call being sensitized. So in our lives, most people walk around in this numb state, just doing machines, doing. And so they're desensitized, they're just like, I've got to get through the day. I've got to get my washing done. I've got to get the kids, got to get this work done. And they don't stop and really kind of connect and go within and deepen who they are in that sense. Whereas a lot of artists naturally have to, and
Yeah.
authors and so on. And so they're very sensitized. And so, they're constantly feeling, watching and sensing and receiving and being so receptive to ideas. But I do want to say anybody can do it when they are open to it. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have
Yeah.
to be
I think
an
everybody is
author to do it.
creative. They just put the wall
Yeah.
up and say that they can't. It's
Yeah.
like every human being is innately creative. You do it micro creativity every day to get through the day.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing using that creative process all throughout the day. You might not
Absolutely.
call it art, but there's art. Art is like social behavior, and you're doing that on the fly all day. You might have some preconceived notion, but the things you're doing on the fly, and you're
Yeah.
able to process what is it outside and what's inside. The author or the creative is more conscious of it and actively doing it to create whatever their art form is.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
But in like your master class that you offer, so do you go through like what you're constantly learning, you're all constantly evolving. So is your book really tied to the master class? Is the class like part of a whole, or is like the class like I guess if you read your book, The Secret Language of Your Body, is that like the first step before you go to the master class, or do you could just go to your class?
You can just go to the master classes, and I actually have several. And I'm constantly, for those people who are interested, one of the best ways is also to go to my website, innasegal.com, and get onto a list or email list, because I constantly update and do new versions and new kind of various master classes. So the one that I think you're referring to is Awaken the Healer Within, but I have one on the secret language, which is like innasegal.com/secret, as well as one on the inner child or one on the ancestry and so on. Like there's variety, because I teach from many
Multiple.
different angles. But essentially, whichever masterclass I'm doing, it's not necessarily the same as the book. It might have reference points, because I have learned so much since I also wrote the book. And I go on a journey that I feel. I'll say it this way: I connect into that unconscious and subconscious aspect of people who are open to this type of work.
Mm-hmm.
And um, every year I get a sense of where are people stuck, where are the issues, where are they not moving forward. And I also ask this question on my social media constantly. And then I go, how do I create either a class or potentially even a new workshop to make sure that I give people those understandings and those tools of how do we work through this, so we become empowered, we become strengthened rather than weakened. And so this is where the classes change. And then I have this 10-day course called Awaken the Healer Within, where people go on this really deep and profound dive of knowing themselves. And with the master classes around this particular workshop, which is my foundational workshop, in a sense of like, if you are ready to go deeper, if you're ready to know yourself in ways you've never known, if you're ready to heal yourself in ways that you never thought was possible, even, that's where you would go. And from there, again, I go through various kind of journeys of how to help people to understand, who am I? What are the aspects of me that impact my life the most? How do I work with these aspects? So, for instance, I talk quite a lot about archetypes lately. And the reason for this is because, one, this is how we understand each other and see each other. And two, it's because when I've been teaching about emotional work since I was 22. And what I found with emotional work is we don't know where it starts and where it ends. And so, and we generalize all our emotions. So we say, I feel anger, but we don't actually go, I feel anger in my heart, or I feel anger in my liver, or I feel anger in here. And anger in the heart that comes from the heart, or the anger that comes from the throat, or the anger that comes from the liver are not the same. And they're actually not telling you the same story. And so, because we generalize, I found that people were working on the same emotion and potentially not that they felt they weren't getting anywhere, because how do we know fully that, that we've worked through this emotion, not just pushed it away and suppressed it? And so I started exploring and going, well, the emotion has beliefs as well. There's beliefs connected to it, and it has stories, and it has a perspective, and where it is in the body tells you again what's going on, and it has memory. And what actually occurs is when we start to view things from the structure, I'm going to say, of archetypes, we can sense exactly what's going on and how this particular part of us, could be even the archetype of the feminine or the masculine, how it's working or how it's stuck, and where and why. And then we can work through all these different stories and emotions and transform it. And I've just seen incredible changes from this. And so it's one of the things. I'm just giving little bits and pieces, but I've seen, we also work on pain and trauma and and diseases, and trying to understand how that gets created and how we can turn it around. But if people are open to it and they're open to taking a few hours of their time, I always have processes that you can do, that you can work with as well. And really taking that, honoring themselves, doing some processes during this masterclass. I've had so many people say that their pain release, that they've had incredible insights. My partner was saying to me yesterday that he does this little survey saying, did you think what did you think of the masterclass? Was it okay? Was it good? Was it life-changing? And he said, like, over 90% of people actually say just the free masterclass is life-changing. So I really encourage people just to take the time and to watch it and to participate in it.
I think it's really important you're doing this. You have this transformative teachings and process that helps people with, like, really kind of deconstruct what's going on and really source, like, find the source of what's going on with themselves. And a lot of times people kind of maybe glaze over that, or maybe just misdiagnose where it's coming from. Like you said, they don't do the deeper dive. They don't go into the looking glass self. They don't do the work. And it's always like you need people to help you understand where to start with that. And you're the kind of person that we love to bring on the show, because you have people who have master classes like yourself, modality teachings, and we bring that to the audience. And I'm glad that you were here today on the Family Like It Goes podcast to bring this perspective to our audience. And like, we have your URL innasegal.com/masterclass. You can just go to the full URL. That will be fully clickable. We've been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on all of the other platforms that you get a podcast, like Apple Podcast, Spotify Video Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcast, many more. By tomorrow, and we create a landing page we'll give to your audience, and people can just pick whatever platform they're used to, and kind of check it out again, and we get the replays that way. But I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.